Good evening and a very warm welcome to you all. I'm Neetu Randhawa, Executive Director of New Jersey chapter of the Indus Entrepreneurs. Welcome to our monthly meeting where we gather to learn from leaders in various industries, share best practices and experiences, and give our members the opportunity to have a conversation and network with like-minded entrepreneurs, senior executives, and professionals. TiE Global is a non-profit organization founded in 1992 and is devoted to the entrepreneurs at all stages of the entrepreneurial life cycle. With a global reach and a local focus, the heart of TiE's efforts lies in its 5 foundational programs of mentoring, networking, education, incubation, and funding. With a focus on giving back to the community, TiE's focus is to nurture the next generation of entrepreneurs. And our vision is that by assisting entrepreneurs, we believe we can empower individuals and create wealth in our communities. TiE has a presence in 14 countries, 59 chapters, and over 3,000 charter members, and additionally 15,000 members globally. Before we begin tonight's program, a few updates for our members. I'm very happy to announce that the charter member retreat this year will be in Rome, Italy, from August 12th to the 15th. And after a very successful conference in Dubai, the TiE Global Summit 2022 is in Hyderabad, India, from December 12th to the 14th. So do block your calendars to attend these flagship events. Also, I want to let you know about what's been happening on the university initiative. The TiE University Global Pitch Competition concluded last week, and there were teams from over 420 universities that applied to the competition, and teams from 8 countries representing 30 colleges made it to the semifinals of the Global Pitch Fest on 14th May. Of these, 12 teams from the US, Germany, and India made it to the finals, which were held on 15th May. And judges from around the world participated, and several charter members and professionals from the ecosystem gave back to the university program. And I'm proud to say that our team was part of the 12 finalists that made it to the global finals. And they were mentored by Mukesh Patel, Arun Shroff, who are the chairs for the university initiative, as well as Dr. Suresh Kumar and Dr. Laurelyn Mears, who is also the CEO of a startup called Steer Us. With this, I end my updates and invite Raman Kapoor to the program to introduce our guests as well as our charter members tonight. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. And maybe Anjan can introduce our speakers for the evening, because he will also be facilitating the interaction with individual charter members when we open it up to questions and discussion. But in other respects, I follow all of your directions. And I will indeed introduce the 2 guests, 2 charter members this evening. And again, I'm following your directions because Mark actually needs no introduction. You know,
You're being too kind.
Mark has been at every event. So before I turn it over to Mark, I just want to congratulate Vinny, CEO of Invictus. And as Neetu mentioned, they've reached the finals of the university entrepreneurship competition. And I heard our advisors, the guidance they provided, and very candidly, some of that guidance was very useful for me as well in my venture. I took some of those lessons with me. So thank you, Mukesh, Arun, Suresh and Laurelyn. And of course, having two professors of entrepreneurship, is kind of unusual to guide any teams. So I think the outlook is pretty good. So with that, I turn it over to you, Mark, to introduce yourself for a minute, and then I'll turn to Suresh after that. So go ahead,
For a
Mark.
minute, I have been a partner at my law firm, Saul Ewing, Ornstein and Lair, for 27 years. I've been the managing partner of the Princeton office. We are not in as many countries as TiE is, but we have offices that run from Boston down to Miami, in Princeton, out to Minneapolis, Chicago, Washington, et cetera, et cetera. We are a business law firm, and I am a business attorney. So what I bring to the table is a business overview for any transaction, because I'm involved in buying and selling businesses and associated real estate. My firm does intellectual property, patent and trademark work. It has a healthcare practice group. It has 400 attorneys. And it's just a delight to be a charter member of TiE. And it always brings to me, I think, more than I bring to it. And with that note, I turn it back to you.
Well, thank you, Mark. And, I think you get the award for having attended the most meetings continuously until, of course, this COVID thing came in. But I think that if there was a prize, you would get it for attendance.
My first contact with the Indian culture was when I flew to Delhi for the dedication of the Swaminarayan Mandir, the Akshardham, and it's been a learning experience for me, and I've internalized what the Pramukh Swami has said, and I'm thankful for that. And back to you.
And our charter members appreciate your contributions.
Thank you.
And with that, I turn it over to Suresh. Suresh, if you could introduce yourself and take a minute or so to tell us about you and your universe.
Absolutely. Thank you, Raman. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Suresh Tiwari. I've been in healthcare and life sciences space for over 20 years. My career has been a combination of early on management consulting, coming out of business school at McKinsey, and I became an entrepreneur over time. So I started and exited a company in patient data privacy and security back in 2019, and started another one that's focused on addressing health inequities, risk, and what all we have seen during pandemic. We continue to build great traction here. I'm looking forward to engage and learn with all of the TiE members here. It's my honor and pleasure to be part of this team. Mark, happy to circle up with you at some time. We are looking at potential M&A activity.
Thank you.
Thank you, Suresh. Thank you, Mark. Yeah, that was terrific. Blair, I don't know how you would like to do this thing. Would you like to introduce the two folks, and maybe you can say something about yourself, and we'll save Anjan for for later.
That's better. That'll be better.
Sure thing. So, hi everyone. I'm Blair. I'm the founder of Marengo, which connects leaders to great executive coaches and strategic advisors. And I want to say a thank you, first of all, to Neetu, Raman, and the New Jersey TiE community for having us. I'm happy to be here tonight with highly sought out Marengo coach, Kim Jones. We thought she'd be a great fit for this group, given her experience in working with entrepreneurs and with leaders, both for one-on-one coaching, but also in strategic advisory around building company culture, mission, values, much of which you'll see throughout the event results in having a strong brand. So it's good to have you here with us tonight, Kim. And we're also glad to be joined by Anouk Pappers. As a branding expert, She'll share some tips in differentiating and branding yourself, your team, your company. In competitive environments, as you know, a lot of times it's frequently the people that make the difference more so than the product or the service. So we're looking forward to hearing what she has to say. It's good to have you here with us tonight, Anouk.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
As Anjan put in the chat, please keep your cameras on and your chat open if you can. It does make for a more interactive session. Anjan, because you all know him well and he's moderated for quite a while, he'll be moderating the session. So if you have any questions, feel free to send them in the chat to everyone, or you can send them directly to Anjan, and he'll do his best to sort of weave them into the event. And we do ask that you grab a pen and paper. Hopefully you'll want to take some notes and also participate in an interactive exercise that Kim will be doing. So thanks again for having us. And without further ado, we're going to have Kim and Anouk set up to sort of interview each other. So we'll have a change of voice. So Anouk, will you help us dive into Kim's practice?
Yeah, I'd love to. Because the interesting fact is that both Kim and me, we're both branding experts. And whereas I focus mostly on developing personal brands, Kim works both with corporate brands, company brands, and personal brands. And as maybe we all kind of know, there are several layers to brands. It's branding is a complicated environment. But I'd like to ask you, Kim, can you tell us a little bit more about how you see the relationship between company branding versus personal branding, and how and if they should be aligned? So how can one, let's say, also benefit from the other?
Wonderful. Thank you, Anouk. And before I jump into that excellent question, I just wanted to take a moment to say how pleased I am to be here with all of the entrepreneurs that we have attending this afternoon. I, as Blair mentioned, do a lot of work with both personal coaching as well as with companies to help them define brands and cultures that will set them up for success in their long-term plans. And I personally spend a lot of time thinking about this topic as an entrepreneur myself and the type of message and vision that I want to bring into the world. So Anouk, to address your question, the difference between personal and company brand, I want to just start by saying that for those of you who are newer entrepreneurs, you're just starting out, or perhaps you have a small lifestyle business that you don't necessarily plan to grow, your personal brand and your company brand will oftentimes be virtually indistinguishable, meaning that there will be significant overlap between the two. And if you think about it, it makes sense. To take a step back and talk about what I mean and what a lot of folks reference when they talk about your personal brand, this is really the representation of what you're an expert in, the problem that you're looking to solve in the world, and what you're good at, what expertise you have, what you want to be known for. And to a large degree, that is going to extend into the mission of your company. Most founders are building their companies on the kinds of problems that they're looking to solve. So the two become quite interrelated. But it's important to note that your brand and how you set it up has implications beyond just that initial tight coupling between personal and company brand. So for example, if at some point you are planning to exit or grow your organization through investment funds, you will have stakeholders that come in and bring a perspective to how your brand needs to evolve as the company matures. So the sort of the personal brand and the company brand may start to diverge, and that is actually a very important thing to be thinking about from the beginning. I'm sure we can all name examples of companies that have not done that so well as they attempt to grow beyond the startup phase, and they end up spending a lot of time, energy, and resources and having to go back and change things up or transform things that aren't working well for a more mature organization. And that can be very distracting as well as expensive. So I'll get a little bit more into that in a minute, but then, just maybe taking a step back and talking about a couple of other elements that are really important in the topic of brand and what it is. Your brand should drive how you set up the experiences for all of the folks that interact with your organization. So every touch point, every communication, every interaction that a customer has with your product or your service should reinforce the brand that you have built. So the bottom line in this is to absolutely be intentional about what you want your brand to stand for. And now, if you happen to be someone who hasn't really put a lot of thought into your personal brand or your company brand, don't worry, it is never too late to do this important work. We'll do a little work on that together today. But the way I advise my clients who are thinking about this for the first time is not only to think about the problem that they're interested in solving in the world and what they want to be known for, but particularly what is it that they're trying to accomplish in their career? What is it that they're passionate about? What is it that the marketplace needs? It's very important, obviously, to deliver a product or service for which there is a demand in the market. And then obviously you want to play to something that you're good at, that you have experience in, or that you plan to grow into, because that is really what's going to drive your own why and your own passion behind doing the work that you're setting out to do. So having that intersection between what you need, what your company needs, and what you're good at is always a great place to think about your brand. And then surrounding that also with some values that will set the stage for culture, which we'll talk about in a minute. The key takeaway on this one is the intentionality. Making sure that you are intentional in how you build your brand, and your intention. So let me also mention that your brand was really comprised of two key components. The first of which is your intention, which we've talked about, the thing you want to do. The second is your reputation, which Anouk will be speaking a lot to in a minute. And your reputation is really important because if you have an intention, and let's say you're a consultant, you're really good at consulting, but you haven't really established a reputation. You're not visible in your business. You may be the best kept secret, and you won't really have a brand if your intention isn't aligned with your reputation. So thinking about those two things hand in hand, that as your business evolves, that your intentions and your reputation is evolved with it. And we'll be giving you tips throughout the afternoon today on how to think about doing just that.
Great. Thank you, Kim, for sharing. That's an important thing. And if we talk about company culture, how do you think, or how do you see that branding or the brand and culture, how do they fit together? And what is the role of culture in a company when it comes to branding?
Yeah, another really great and important question. Culture is so critical to the long-term sustainability and performance of an organization, but oftentimes founders and CEOs of startup companies are not thinking enough about it in the early stages, and that is a mistake. And I'll highlight the reason why that needs to be not an afterthought, but a forethought in everything that you do. Your brand, if you're not thinking about culture, will naturally drive the kind of culture that you create. So as an example, if your brand is about being fast and disruptive, your culture will intentionally or not, will be set along the kinds of values that you set through your brand. So thinking intentionally in the beginning about what you want your culture to do for you, not just in your the early phase of your business, but as your company matures. So some questions you can ask yourself include, do I want to have a culture that attracts a workforce and people to work here who want to be part of this organization? Do I set up a culture that is diverse and brings in lots of different experiences and perspectives, because we all know by now how much that will drive performance, outcomes, and retention for organizations? Am I going to build a culture that is centered on principles like integrity and trust and respect? This is all, I would say, it may seem, especially the last one, a little bit obvious, but you would be surprised how many companies aren't thinking about this early enough. And then they get down the line and then they're looking to exit or they're looking to get funding. And suddenly they're hearing about some changes that need to happen in order for outside entities to feel confident in backing them or in supporting them as a more mature organization. So those are some things to consider from the outset. What I would also say is that a lot of companies, if you look at the goals and the culture in the earlier phases, there may be a temptation to trade off some things for expedience and quick growth that could hurt long-term cultural viability. So let me give you an example of that. Let's say that you hire in a bunch of people who look like you, who think like you, maybe you know them, you've worked together before, and you know by bringing them in, you can move really fast. However, what you're doing is you're building in a lack of diversity of experience and perspective from day one. And we know from research that if companies are set up with that attribute in place, it is significantly more difficult to adjust that down the line when you start to have the conversations about why diversity is really a key foundational component of any strong culture. And making those changes down the line are very costly and disruptive. So I would caution people to make trade-offs for expedience in the early stages, because that has a way of coming in and setting a foundation that can be very difficult to adapt and adjust over time. And I will say that a lot of folks will overlook things like bringing in a really strong person, but also someone who has maybe a little bit of a toxic style because that person is effective. Those things really can set the tone for some long-term cultural challenges that really should be thought through as early as possible.
So does it mean that your culture, let's say the culture you create in the beginning of your company, is it set it and forget it, or is it something that might organically, that you can grow? Can you adapt it? Or is it like, okay, I create it once and it's a one and done?
Yeah, I would say that it's whether you set it intentionally or it just happens, your culture will emerge. So best to think about it intentionally. As I mentioned, there is a progression to how most companies' cultures evolve. In the early phases, the cultures look very much in line with moving quickly, doing the things that, again, help for fast growth or to overcome challenges that are unique to companies that are just starting to get off the ground. So those companies, again, will have to think through as they grow and mature what they will be looking at doing differently for long-term sustainability. So in those cases, it's always good to be more actively involved in setting the culture and adapting the culture, because over time, if you don't do that, you get into some situations that we've all heard about in the media. So I'll just mention one example that I think everyone on this call will be familiar with. We all know Uber as a great example of a startup organization that had an incredible mission to bring transportation out into the sharing economy in ways that made it affordable for everyone. So awesome vision, but of course they were in a very entrenched and highly regulated industry. And so in their effort to disrupt that industry, they did a lot of things like they ignored regulations and rules. They brought in people who had, an attitude of disrupt at all costs because we're doing something great socially. What was also happening is in that there were a lot of other things around toxic attributes of leaders, harassment, a culture known for bullying that were happening as the company was being established, but because the culture was a bit of an afterthought, or their culture wasn't intentionally meant to be this disruptive culture, they ended up going through a tremendous amount of upheaval and disruption because of the fact that they could not sustain that culture as they began to integrate into a larger ecosystem that included investors and working within the the system that they are a part of. So I think that's a cautionary tale, and obviously an extreme example, but a good example of, if we do a thought experiment of if Uber had gone back and instead, had their culture of disruption and did some of the things that they still would have had to adjust, but had more of a culture based on integrity and trust and respect, which you could argue, would Uber be Uber with that? But it's a good question to engage in, because these are the things as entrepreneurs and business owners that we really need to think through. So, we can continue to grow and mature our organization and set them up for high performing cultures that are known for whatever you want them to be known for, whether that's innovation or creativity or efficient, fast performance or being a great place to work. Any of those things will require a certain type of culture to support it. And, it is really important as a business owner to keep that front of mind.
Oh, great. So you could kind of say that when you start your company, think about, let's say, some basic or ground values. You keep them. And of course, when you grow, you will need different people, you will need different attitudes and mentalities of people, but you still would have those basic values, let's say, valid and working throughout, let's say, from beginning to exit or end of your company. If we talk about that, about company values, personal values, I think you have an exercise in mind that you would like to share with our audience today. Is that right?
Yeah, I do. Absolutely. And Blair, I don't know if we want to try to drop some of these questions into the chat, but what I would love to do is, now that we have gone through a brief overview of brand and culture and how they're interrelated, and personal brand and company brand and how those are interrelated, I'd love to see where folks are at with respect to a couple of questions. And some of these you may have already answered. Some of these might be things to think about in light of some of the discussion today. So for those of you who haven't already thought too closely about this, what do you want to? What is it that you want to solve in the world? What problem do you want to solve in the world? The second question to think about, and you can do whichever of these are most germane and pertinent to your business, is what differentiates you from your competition that makes you unique and stand out in the marketplace? And Blair will capture these in the chat. The third question that I'd love for you to think about, again, if it's germane to your business, is where your brand and your company overlap, your company and your brands, your personal and your company's brand overlap, and where they currently diverge, and how might that need to be adjusted and changed as your company grows and matures. And the last is, what values do you want to impart that will serve as the foundation for the culture that you want to set as your company grows?
Great questions. I'm sure we're not expecting everyone to answer them like this, but it's great to think about and to start, to ignite some thought processes.
Yeah, absolutely. And with that, I would definitely encourage folks to spend a few minutes thinking about that, but I'd love to take some questions that anyone has on this, or if someone needs help with one of the questions that they'd like to chat about, please feel free.
You mentioned the word strong personality. If I move that phrase along a lineal line, I could call that person a bully. And that is very destructive for any organization, regardless of size. And I've seen it. You need to have a collegial environment. You need to have teamwork. And as you said, you need diversity, but also inclusion. So you don't want to push people away. You want to bring them in, and it makes for a more productive result.
Thank you, Mark, for that comment. And I will mention, by way of background, I was formerly a CIO for Farmers Insurance Company. I oversaw their personal lines IT organization. We were in charge of setting the strategic IT direction for the organization, supporting the personal lines division, in addition to doing major systems replatform. And I can tell you, when I joined the organization, it was for the purpose of doing a large systems modernization program. And the culture that I inherited was one, Mark, based on exactly what you mentioned. There was a command and control, a fear style. The prior leader had been a bully and was toxic, and that spread like a weed throughout the entire organization, because a lot of the behaviors we know that that employees emulate start from the top. And so the first thing that I spent my time on was restructuring the entire leadership team to bring in a different type of cultural mindset and values and principles that would support the kind of change and resilience and growth that my team was responsible for. And I now take those principles and work with companies who are starting out, again, to intentionally set their cultures from the get-go. So to your point, the temptation to hire in the bullies is lessened because of the damage that can be caused by making those decisions and then having to deal with the ramifications later.
And those bullies will force their colleagues to leave the company, whether it's a law firm or anybody else, because people don't want to be abused.
No.
And that bully tends to act as a silo, and he or she doesn't share. And as a result, at least in a law firm, that can result in malpractice.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's the cross-pollination that really helps.
Yeah. Yeah. I can't emphasize how important the points that you are mentioning, how important those points are, especially now in the Great Resignation, where we see employees for the first time in mass leaving organizations because they no longer want to work for bullies, and they're willing to walk away without even having another job. That's the part of this dynamic that's new. People have been quitting because of their managers forever, but there was something that happened in COVID where so many people woke up and said, you know what, life is too short for me to be in these environments, and I'm willing to make a transition and not even necessarily know what that transition looks like before I leave where I'm at, and that is something that has really affected how companies are looking at leaders. So they're finally adopting practices that support leaders having the kinds of traits that we know lead to these great cultures, but a lot of companies weren't enforcing previously. So there's an investment now in leadership talent to really drive those cultural attributes. And there's a lot of work that's being needed because it has been overlooked for so long and tolerated for so long.
Kim, I have a question. You said regarding the constitution of the team that runs the company, particularly to start with. My question is that when you start a company, you want to have a good amount of mind share. So there is a tendency for the entrepreneur to take known people, maybe they are classmates, college mates, or friends, or even relatives. Today, we have seen world over, particularly from India, where I am from, there are family-based companies that have thrived and prospered extensively, very well, And then down the line, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years down the line, they've diversified, meaning they've included external people, like for cultural diversity and values. So the point I'm trying to make is forming and running a company initially with the known people who have a very good value system, mind share, shared values, and the drive and mission cannot necessarily be wrong. But I would contend the entrepreneur must be aware and alive to the reality of diversity and inclusivity.
Yeah. There's a. Thank you for that, Raj. There's a lot of a lot of thinking and articles and debates that have been occurring on this exact topic of, is it a good thing to have that sort of common thought,
common thread or common
the common thought coming into an organization and who you hire. But I think what we know is that that is a short-sighted objective. First of all, when we talk about, for example, Silicon Valley being a meritocracy, it's actually more of a meritocracy, because most of the founders are bringing in people that look just like them. And that's why we have such a problem with lack of diversity and these sort of toxic bro cultures that spin up over time, because there is sort of this recycling of some very toxic cultures that start from this idea that I'm just going to hire people who are exactly like me. And in that process, you tend to have groupthink that creates risks for the organization, creates cultural challenges for the organization that in the long run often do more harm than they do good. So really thinking that through in the beginning, that like, hey, if I hire all my college buddies, we're all going to think about things the same way and go fast. That's a double-edged sword, because sometimes the way everybody's thinking about something is not going to help the organization, the consumer, or the community that they operate in. So just something to keep in mind, that you hear the argument for this, but there's also a very strong argument for why this is not the best way to go.
I agree with you, but then the entrepreneur is very worried that the company has to make the break-even point. The company has to make the first $1 million mark. So what if I hire somebody who is more of a 9-to-5 person and who doesn't share my values? Sometimes as entrepreneurs, we have seen not only in Wall Street, even in Silicon Valley, people work endlessly, like 18, 20, 25 hours in a day to make it happen.
Yeah. Well, I think
is it really harmful to bring in people a little later? That's what I'm asking.
Well, yeah, and it's a great question and a topic that we could spend a lot of time on. And I think it's actually a really good segue into the conversation that Anouk and the information that Anouk has to share with us, which is really, how is it that you build that sort of that business from a reputational perspective, and through really thinking through how your brand gets manifested in the outside world. So why don't we go ahead and jump in for that and into that. And Raj, if you have any other questions, hopefully we'll have some time at the end to
Thank
get to them. Yeah, thank you. So Anouk, I'm so excited to be speaking with you today, because you really bring in a really strong perspective on how entrepreneurs and those who are building a business can get their brand out into the world. So now that we've defined our company brand, the personal brands and the key people to it, as well as defined our culture, how do you think about bringing all of that into the outside world?
Yeah. Thank you, Kim, for that, and thank you for enlightening us about company and culture, which is, of course, a very important starting point when we are entrepreneurs or when we're setting up our businesses. And the first thing that I think we have to realize is that we live in a reputation economy. And you mentioned reputation several times already. We are our own reputation, and the reputation is the most important asset that we have. And of course, we all know Warren Buffett, who says we can afford to lose money, lots of money, but we cannot afford to lose one shred of our reputation. We only have one reputation, and the moment that we lose it, it's very hard to take it back. So living in the reputation economy that we are today means that we, as the founders and CEOs of our companies, but actually everyone within our company, is being judged and evaluated as if we are brands. They look at us, they judge us, and they decide yes or not to do business with us. A reputation is also something that people say about you when you're not in the room, which makes the link to the online world. Because in the past 2 years, of course, since COVID, I mean, your online presence has been growing in importance for the past 7-8 years, but in the past 2 years, it really took a flight. And what we're seeing now is that our first, second, third impression is online. So we need to make sure that we align ourselves from the offline world, let's say, into the online world. Because whether we like it or not, we are my favorite one-liner, we are who Google says we are. Which means that whatever people see about us online, they think is true. And the phase or the period that we can say, you know, that's not true, or it was not intended like this, we're beyond that. You are who Google says you are. And what I would like to do now, I would like to ask you some questions. So go back into your chat, please, and answer the following question for me with a simple yes or no. The question is, do you Google yourself on a regular basis? And regular, let's say every 3 months. And I'm counting on Blair that she will give me, I don't need exact percentages, but some sort. So please, everybody participate and give us an idea of what percentage of the group Googles themselves and what percentage doesn't.
Like about 80% say no.
Ay, ay, ay.
Did you say 80 or 88?
80.
I'm in a quant world. Someone else is probably much better equipped to gauge that, but that's my estimate.
If it would be 88, it would be more or less similar. Okay, so that means that only 20% of all of us here today Google ourselves, 20%. Remember that. My second question is, do you Google others? Before you meet someone, after you met someone, before you decide to hire someone, before you decide to do business with someone, before you decide to go on a date with someone, do you Google others? I see a few more yeses going by. Is that correct, Blair?
Well, so far we're at about 100% yes. No one said, oh, we got one no. Okay. I think it's the dissenter.
Or you did that on purpose.
So yeah,
okay.
Big,
okay,
very
so
lopsided.
interesting point here. 20% of us Google ourselves. Let's make it 90% Google others. That means that there's an enormous gap, because the people who do not Google themselves, we are all being Googled. So people are looking at us online and we don't know what we look like. Think about the old days when we had in-person meetings. You go into an in-person meeting, you don't bring business cards, you don't prepare a presentation, you're not really sure what you're going to say, and you did not look in the mirror before you went in. Who does that? I think nobody. So let's make an agreement today that as of today, everybody's going to Google themselves every 3 months. Just go online, type in your name, and see what shows up. You can decide to do nothing about it. That's fine, but you have to be aware of what you look like online, because people judge you based on what they see online. Remember, you are who Google says you are. Mm-hmm. And it's not just because I'm telling you, it's also because it has consequences. Because my third question is, whoever decided not to follow through with a relationship based on what you saw or maybe didn't see online? So who decided to say, oh, I'm not going to go on with this relationship, I'm not going to hire this person, I'm not going to meet them, whatever it is. Again, please in the chat, whoever decided not to follow through with a relationship after having Googled someone. Mm-hmm. Yes, no, I did, whatever the...
Anouk, can you repeat the question? Because I think that people
Yes.
are unclear on what should they say, yes or no.
Yeah. Did you ever decide not to follow through with a relationship based on what you found or didn't find online? Yeah, we got some mixed answers here, I think. Overall, in general, there's around 50% of people who decided not to follow through with a relationship. Think about the consequences that this can have for your business. You're looking for investors. Let's say you're looking for investors, or I'm looking for investors, and so is Kim. Kim has a great online presence and online reputation, really spectacular. Mine, so-so. Mark is a potential investor. We approach him, we approach him. He looks at us, he Googles Kim, he Googles me, he says, wow, she looks really good, she not so much. Who is he going to connect with first? With Kim, of course. And if she lives up to if her reputation, let's say, from the online world aligns with how she presents herself in the offline world, Mark is going to probably invest in her and not even going to speak to me. So the thing is, if we are not aware, if we don't make sure that our online presence is up to speed, we are losing out on opportunities. That's the point that I was trying to make. So I hope that everybody's going to Google themselves every 3 months and see what comes up and hopefully also do something about it.
Wonderful. And Anouk, you mentioned that, how important it is to understand your online presence. How do you actually go about creating an online presence that's intentional and that aligns with what you want the world to know about you?
The simple and very short answer is content. Content is king, and we need content to prove who we are. So we're saying that we're a strategic visionary, but we need content to prove it. I'm a brand anthropologist. That's my positioning. That's my personal brand, but I need to create content to prove it. So content is the short answer. And the long answer or longer answer is that we need to make sure that as the CEOs or founders of our company, but also the people within our company, we need to help them and give them a voice. Everybody needs to be able to communicate about what we're trying to achieve. We don't necessarily need to talk about exactly what we're doing, but we need to talk about why we're doing what we're doing. We need to talk about our values. We need to share our company culture to the outside world, because people connect with people and not with businesses. So nobody's going to do business with your company because of your company. They're going to do business with you, with your company, because of the people that we have. So branding and positioning the people within your company, giving them a voice and helping them, supporting them with content that supports, again, the positioning and the company. That's how we can accomplish, let's say, creating that online reputation and online presence for the people, the key people within the firm.
Wonderful. What are some of the common obstacles that you see people make when they're creating their content?
How much time do you have? So there are several obstacles why people are not creating content, and I will quickly go over 5 of them, but also let's say how we can tackle those, because obstacle is one, but of course we need to know how we can tackle those. The first thing is that people very often say that I'm not socialized to talk about myself. So it's very hard to put myself in the center of the attention, to talk about myself. It's not how we've been socialized. And we see that especially with women and with people from underrepresented groups. So that's, of course, the Indian people as well. What we see, we're not being socialized. We are just working really hard and then hoping that we will be recognized. Well, in today's world, that doesn't work anymore. How do you tackle that? Well, one of the things that we do is we interview our clients. So instead of you having to talk about yourself, you can make sure that you are being interviewed so that other people can talk about you, which makes it much easier, because I can talk about Blair, say how great she is, much easier for me to do so than when she does it herself. So that's a very nice and simple tactic, let's say, how you can overcome that. Another way of overcoming that idea is that it's not about your ego. It's not about getting yourself out there for the sake of it. It's about helping, mark the word, helping the people on the other side of the room or the other side of the screen to better understand what you stand for and the value that you bring. So again, it's not about having a big ego. It's really about helping. And the moment we say that, women especially, and again, people from underrepresented groups, we start thinking differently, because it's not about that ego. It's about really supporting and helping others. And that's something that we really like to do. The second obstacle is that people say, I have no idea what to create content about. I don't know what my communication topics are. That's why we have to go back to the company brand and the personal brand. Think about, what are you really good at as a person or as a company? What are you passionate about? And thirdly, what is your target audience interested in? And if you can find the overlap between those three circles, that's where you find your communication topics and you have to stick to them. So in my case, I only communicate about personal branding and online presence. Those are my topics. And why I do that is because I want all of you to know in which situations to connect with me. If I have another topic every week or every month, I'm a jack of all trades. You have no idea where to connect. So it's really finding that niche, let's say, that focus and stick to your communication topics there. Another obstacle, I don't like to be in front of a camera, so I'm not going to make any video content. Well, that's a valid reason, of course, as the other ones. But nowadays, we all have our iPhones. It's very easy to practice speaking in front of a camera. You just use your camera, you record. If you don't like it, you just throw it away. But 80% of all content that's being consumed, I think at the end of this year, is video content, which means people want to know how you come across. People want to know how you speak. People want to get to know you. And video is a great way of conveying briefly an opinion on a topic, a trend that you're seeing, maybe even a short video about the company that you have or the service that you have. So get used to being in front of a camera. And of course, if you decide not to, that's fine. It's everybody's personal decision, but it's become so very easy to create content. You can decide if you don't want to be speaking in front of a camera, just have someone next to you. You have a conversation which you record. There's many different ways in which you can overcome, let's say, that fear of not wanting to be in front of a camera. Then there is, of course, people who have a hard time writing. I'm not a good writer, so I'm not going to create content. Well, there's lots of people who can write. So there's lots of support that you can get there, helping you write short blogs, short articles, again, interview you. And the last obstacle that I want to share is that people say, I have no time, which is, of course, it's true for every one of us. We have something new that, let's say, came into our lives, which is the whole online presence. We didn't ask for it. It's here. And we have to use it because it really can benefit our business. So make sure that you do spend some time on it and ask professionals, outside professionals who can help you build that online presence and keep you current and relevant over time.
Yeah, and again, I know that last one is probably something that everyone is struggling with. I know I struggle with it myself. Anything else you want to say when you have people, especially really busy entrepreneurs who need to make time to create content? Any other tips you can offer there?
Well, I think if you look at a company, there are several things that you can do. I mean, again, there are three ways that we create content with our clients, which is we interview them from scratch, which takes not that much time from them. We define the topics and etc. We write the stories for them, or we create the video content. We can also work with existing content. So it might be that you have been interviewed or that you've been speaking on a panel, and we can repurpose that content and reuse it going forward. I have a client and she wrote a book in 2009. She said, oh, darn, the book is no longer relevant. I said, no. We interview you. We asked her 3 short questions about the book. We asked something about the past, about the present, and about the future. And there you go. 13 years or 14 years later, the book is relevant again. So it's really thinking smartly about existing content. And you can also use existing content from third parties. So if you say my topic is sustainability, for example, then we can source articles on Forbes or Harvard Business Review or other interesting titles and use those. Write a short lead-in that really represents your vision on the topic, then add the original article, and there you go. You have created new content. When we talk about within the company, and let's say your employees, the company probably has content. So we can use the same content for different employees, different key people. They can all add their own individual vision or lead into it. So we're, let's say, using the same basis of content, but we're all making it our own with our own voices, which also gives us, let's say, a little bit of control about what our key people are communicating and are publishing to the outside world. So there are lots of ways. Some are simple, some are a bit more complicated, but there are many, many ways in which you can create or use content.
Wonderful. And talking about online presence, what are some common mistakes that people make with respect to their online presence?
Well, that's also a whole list, but I'm also looking at Blair because I'm looking at the time. So maybe I'm going to share two of the most common mistakes, or maybe even just one. The most important mistake people make when it comes to their personal brand and their online presence is that we do not focus on the future. If you think about your LinkedIn, your resume, your bio, probably text on your website, everything is about the past. What we've done, where we worked, what we did, where we studied. Well, we believe that we should shift gears and talk about the future. What is the problem that we're going to be solving? What is the added value that we will bring? What is the vision that we have? Where is our industry headed? All these kinds of things. So talking about the future, positioning yourself and your company towards solving those problems in the future, that's a mistake that a lot of people make, or that's something that a lot of people still do not do because it's much more comfortable or easy, or I don't know, we're just used to it to talk about the past. Also, when we are in conversations or in meetings, we are just starting saying, well, that's actually the second mistake. That's that you're not your job title. So when we are in a group and everybody's presenting themselves, we all start with, I'm a lawyer, I'm a CEO, I'm an SVP, and actually we don't really care about job titles. We care about who you are as a person and what you bring to the table. So start thinking about that when you present yourselves in meetings, but also how you present yourself on your LinkedIn or on different platforms online.
So we just had Raj type into the chat that we need at least one more hour, but unfortunately we are now already at the top of our hour, and I want to be respectful of everybody's time. I know, Anouk, you and I could keep going on this for some time, but given the time on June, why don't we go ahead and kick it back to you for any final thoughts or questions?
No, thank you so much. So let's do it. Let's tighten our seatbelts a little bit. Next 4 or 5 minutes, I'm going to send a rapid fire set of questions. Each question, I would say 20 to 30 seconds max. Okay. So Anouk, first question to you, Zoom meetings, branding, tips, mistakes.
Yeah. Branding is very important. Lighting, make sure that you have good lighting. Make sure that your camera is on, because the more your camera is on, you are active, you're in the conversation, which will might help you get a promotion or a project, whatever it is that you're looking for. Make sure there's not too much space above your head. Ideally, we see you belly button up because it conveys a lot of trust.
Fantastic, fantastic. Next question. I'm busy. I just started a company. What do I focus on? Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, God knows what else. And that one question. Second question, on LinkedIn, I get so many requests. Whom should I accept?
Okay. First answer, LinkedIn. Focus on LinkedIn because that's the business social media, business network. Second, in principle, I would accept anyone unless they're shady. And the reason why is because it may not be that person who's relevant, but that person's network might be relevant for you. So it's not only your network, it's also the network of your network. And because you're not sharing any private or really personal things anyway, and everybody can see it, I would say grow your network. And again, unless they're shady.
So one question for you, and then I'll come to Kim, and then maybe I'll come back. So what do I focus on, myself or my business in terms of branding? I'm an entrepreneur.
A combination of the two. Your company brand builds upon your personal brand. Your personal brand probably is stronger than you are because you're a startup. So I would say focus on your personal brand and bring in, let's say, the company brand. And then over time that will shift.
So Kim, a question for you. You have led large technical teams and people, and there is nothing more people-oriented than IT. So people come with. So let's say the personal brand is your soft, your nurturing. How do you manage people with passion but who lack competence? What do you do with that?
It's interesting because it depends on what you mean by competence. Because what I have learned in my 25 years of working in corporate jobs and leading teams is that everybody's competent at something. And the best way to bring your team into a high performing team is to find out what the strengths are of the folks that are on your team and play to those strengths. We tend to spend so much time managing to the weaknesses of the folks that we have on our team, trying to build competencies for which someone doesn't have natural talent. It's much easier to actually work with the strengths that people have and allow them to accelerate along that type of a learning curve. I would say if that doesn't work, then you have to figure out if competence is something that is critical, the particular kind of competence is something that's critical for a job. And if it is, then you have to make some difficult decisions as a team leader about.
As you gave this fantastic answer that everybody's competent in something, in your experience, was there a specific event or a person or a personality that you thought about that you think if you share, it will be useful for everybody? Something happened and that's how, it moved. We all have had those experiences.
I would say one key thing that I did as a leader in IT is I brought in people who did not have technical backgrounds. I happen to be one of them. I came over as a leader from the business side in the last 15 years of my career. Having business skills in IT is so critical, but many people in tech are enculturated to believe that you have to sit in a developer's chair or a tester's chair or some kind of an engineer's chair to be able to move up and rise within the ranks of IT. So a great example is when you bring in somebody, and I have been subject of this myself, that doesn't have that competence, if you will, to really help to demonstrate how the complementary skills that they bring, the process, the leadership, the business communications, the risk management, all of those things can be an incredible complement and drive the success of a team in ways that most people don't understand.
That's a great answer. One question that has come is, how does one overcome personal limitations? Now, obviously, the unsaid is they should recognize their personal limitations. So 2 questions. As a manager, how do you communicate personal limitations? And if you understand it, how do you overcome? Any reflections on that?
Yeah, this is a really tricky question because of the fact that personal limitations tend to be the topic of conversation in so many managerial employee discussions. And if that's the only thing you're talking about with your employee, it's going to erode trust. It's going to cause them to become disengaged and they're going to feel like they're not adding the appropriate level of value to the organization. So the way that I used to look at this is oftentimes we manage to all of the skills on a job description. And if you've got someone who has limitations in a couple of areas, rather than trying to shore those up and spend your focus on that, figure out what they do really well and what resources you have on the team that can complement in areas that other people aren't so strong. That will get the trust high. It'll improve the engagement. It will help people perform at their best. In terms of personal limitations that employees are interested in overcoming, so they say, like one for me is I was terrified of public speaking for most of my career, but it was important to my role. Is I would say, I want to overcome that limitation. And so really working on a plan, but it often works best when it's motivated by both the employee and the company so that the appropriate strategy can be developed that supports the employee and builds that trust and engagement.
So last question, most of the people here are entrepreneurs, they run their own companies. The latest HBR article, actually the whole magazine, the whole issue talks about things which are fairly, alive right now. They're saying 360-degree feedback is out, annual competency review is out, appraisals are out. In fact, annual raises are out. There's nothing called annual raises. Netflix started that. Your personal advice and view on how those things affect people who are running their own organizations in today's world where people are not only doing personal branding, everybody is a volunteer employee.
Yeah.
If you want to, you can give them a salary, but they volunteer to work for you. So how do you manage that?
Well, I understand why companies are really pushing back on some of these standards because they don't actually drive the kinds of outcomes that people are looking for. When you look at things like 360-degree reviews, salary increases, performance evaluations, all of those things are meant to incentivize and to inspire growth within employees. And we know that that often doesn't work. So the way to handle it, in my humble opinion, is to have those conversations with people as part of what you do as a manager. So you are giving them the feedback that they need. You have a culture based on feedback. So people, as a matter of course, are talking to each other, not this radical candor, which is just talk about what people are doing wrong, but really what they're doing well and how they can be, effective in more situations, again, leveraging their strengths. So a lot of what you've talked about, things that are being eliminated, what they're being replaced with is a completely different kind of management style and cultural style that builds in some of those elements in so that they feel supportive of the employee rather than punitive, which is what a lot of these systems ended up, resulting in.
Can I end with one comment, and Raman, I'll pass it to you, is what exactly you said, Kim, is, can I summarize by saying we are moving from a manly way of managing to a more softer, womanly way of managing, which is much more nicer, effective, and we can see this on the screen itself. Raman, over to you.
I love that. I love that. The way that I would say it to completely reinforce that sentiment, Anjan, is we have had an over-indexing towards the masculine traits, not necessarily men, but the masculine energies and traits, which are competition, logic, striving, pushing, not resting, performing, producing. And we're now starting to balance it with empathy and collaboration and creativity and intuition and restoration and all of these things that you obviously, you don't want to go too far to one side or the other. It's in the balance where you create well-being. So very well said.
One more comment here. When I went to business school 30 years back, if you were the boss, you had all the answers. And if somebody asks you a question, you cannot say that I don't know because you're the boss. And now if you're the boss, vulnerability, emotion, empathy are what is needed. And if you can cry in public, you are awesome. You are awesome.
Amen.
Anjan, I feel like weeping.
Raman, can I make only one comment? No discussion here, but only one comment directly to Anouk. I may not like the EV manufacturer. Let me name him for a limited audience. I may not like Elon Musk, but then I bought his car because there is no other viable alternative. Point number 2, I may not like the Amazon owner, but his items come directly to my table, so I buy from him. Thank you.
So, Anouk, I won't ask you to comment on that unless you'd like to. But, the fact is that there are some people whose reputations are not completely aligned with their product, as you said, and we buy their products anyway because we like the product. Yeah.
Or maybe there is not a good alternative yet, because I'm sure if there would be a good alternative to Tesla or to Amazon, Raj would probably switch.
So look, I have to confess that I am one of the 80% who don't Google quarterly. So, that I learned a great deal from this discussion. Thank you very much. Particularly, I won't go over everything because that'll just take too much time, but, focusing on the future, I thought was a very good piece of advice, and how to bring the best version of yourself and your company online, I thought was just inside the company and online. I thought was just really good advice. So thank you, Blair, for this opportunity you've afforded us to have Kim and Anouk there. And if it's okay with you, we might even consider, Nidu, if you'd like, that we circulate a recording of this. And what we could do at the same time is maybe have contact information for the three of you. So folks who want to connect with you directly to continue the conversation or for guidance, that they should be able to connect with you. Is that okay, Blair?
Yeah, that's fine. And what I typically offer is, if anyone, I see Raj is looking for contact info. If anyone wants to put their email in the chat right now, then I'll go ahead and save it, and I'll reach out, and we can, chat more about Kim and Anouk and what you're looking to learn. So I'm happy to do that as well.
Oh, thank you so much. That's very kind of you. And thank you for organizing this. As you can tell, everyone thought it was much too brief, but we don't blame you for that. we should have allotted more time. But thank you, Blair. Thank you, Kim. Thank you, Anouk. This was just terrific. Yeah, and we must have you back because it was just too short. Okay.
Thank you
Awesome.
very much for having us.
Thank you
Bye
so
for now.
much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you, everyone.